Welcome to Module 6, Learning Theories Underpinning Today's Digital Learning and Integrating Technology into Modern-Day Teaching, Learning, and Assessment with Diverse Learners. By the end of the module, learners will be able to prepare a student-centric, technology-enriched lesson plan using the Assure model, apply learning theory in the classroom by using digital tools, learning strategies, and interactive resources for connected learning, evaluate digital tools and resources for potential classroom application, and apply universal design principles to the TELP development process. Over the past 50 years, there have been several dominant theories or theorists of learning. Each has implications on not only learning, but on the use of technology and media. First is behaviorism. Behaviorism is a worldview that assumes a learner is essentially passive, responding to environmental stimuli. The learner starts off as a clean slate, and behavior is shaped through positive and negative reinforcement. Learning is therefore defined as a change in behavior in the learner. Skinner and Pavlov are amongst the seminal thinkers in this theory. In the context of technology and media usage, the collaboration, communication, and creativity going on during learning with technology obviously affect the behavior of the learner. Next is cognitivism, which is a learning theory that focuses on the processes involved in learning rather than on the observed behavior. As opposed to behaviorists, cognitivists do not require an outward exhibition of learning, but focus more on the internal processes and connections that take place during learning. In essence, the human brain is a processor of information. Technology and media provide information and virtual experiences for the brain to process. Brunner and Gagné were the leading theorists in this camp. Building upon the theory of cognitivism, constructivism examined and explored the engagement learners experienced during real-world authentic applications, shifting from passive consumption of information to active acquisition of knowledge through problem-solving, creativity, and discovery. In essence, learners create their own interpretations of their experiences and the world around them and build upon previously acquired knowledge. Piaget is the main theorist behind constructivism. In the context of technology and learning, digital tools and resources provide information and real-world authentic experiences to learners. Finally is constructivism, developed by Seymour Papert, a pupil of Piaget's. Builds upon constructivist views of learners, building knowledge through new experiences and building upon previously acquired knowledge. It extends the theory by identifying new learning is most effective when a part of the process involves constructing a meaningful product. Technology, media, and the maker movement embrace this theory because evidence of learning is easy to build and share with an audience. Some integral theorists involved with 21st century pedagogy and technology. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was an 18th century Genevan philosopher, writer, and composer. He believed in the goodness of children and demonstrated that children can develop by letting them freely explore and learn. Pestalozzi was a 19th century Swiss pedagogue and educational reformer. He argued children should learn through activity and through things. He wanted to establish a psychological method of instruction that was in line with the laws of human nature. As a result, he placed a special emphasis on spontaneity and self-activity. Children should not be given ready-made answers, but should arrive at answers themselves. Froebel was a German pedagogue, a student of Pestalozzi, who laid the foundation for modern education based on the recognition that children have unique needs and capabilities. He created the concept of kindergarten and learning objects for the young. Dewey was a 20th century American philosopher, psychologist, and educational reformer. He believed continued experiences helped shape the attitudes and dispositions of the learner. Experiences, both good and bad, led to cognitive growth, and the continuity in these events eventually led to the formation of a habit. In Dewey's vision of situational learning, the students and their experiences are the primary focus of learning. Every student has the right to experience learning, participate in instruction, and cultivate essential skills for their futures. Piaget was a Swiss philosopher and the creator of the constructivist theory, which states that people produce knowledge and form meaning based upon their experiences. The role of teachers is very important. Instead of giving a lecture, teachers function as facilitators whose role is to aid the student when it comes to their understanding. Freire was a Brazilian educationalist. He has left a significant mark on thinking about progressive educational practices. He created the pedagogy of the oppressed, which examined how learners were often left with very little power. Freire proposes a reciprocal relationship between the teacher and the students in a democratic environment that allows everyone to learn from each other. Technology and media provides methods that can empower learners with information and choice. John Dewey, one of the most influential U.S. philosophers and educational reformers, believed in democracy and experiential learning, or learning by doing. Dewey argued that curriculum should be relevant to students' lives. He saw learning by doing and developmental and practical life skills as crucial to their futures. Finally, there was Seymour Papert, who was the creator of the constructionism, who believed in developing that students should show evidence of their learning through creating meaningful artifacts. Here's some critical vocabulary and terms for technology instruction. Pedagogy, which is the art and science of technology. Direct instruction refers to instructional approaches that are structured, sequenced, and led by teachers. Instructional scaffolding is a process through which a teacher adds supports for students in order to enhance learning and aid in the mastery of tasks. Rubrics are an evaluation tool or set of guidelines used to promote the consistent application of learning expectations, objectives, and learning standards in the classroom. Project-based learning is a teaching method in which students learn by actively engaging in real-world and personally meaningful projects. Product-based learning is the process by which students learn the content by doing a project. Students then share their application of their core content knowledge and skills via authentic product. Real-world application, new information skills are applied to authentic real-world situations during the learning process. Scenario-based learning uses interactive scenarios to support active learning strategies such as problem-based or case-based learning. It normally involves students working their way through a storyline or narrative, usually based around an ill-structured or complex problem, which they are required to solve. Finally, student-centered learning refers to a wide variety of educational programs, experiences, and approaches, and academic support strategies that are intended to address the distinct learning needs, interests, aspirations, or cultural backgrounds of individual students and groups of students. Continuing with critical vocabulary, discovery learning is an inquiry-based constructivist learning theory that takes place in problem-solving situations, where the learner draws on his or her own past experience and existing knowledge to discover facts and relationships and new truths to be learned. Next is the theory of multiple intelligences, which differentiates human intelligence into specific modalities. These types of intelligences include visual spatial, verbal linguistic, logical mathematical, bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalistic. Standard-based instruction is a teacher method that is based on standards or skill mastery. Facilitator is a teacher who does not operate under the traditional concept of teaching, but rather is meant to guide and assist students in learning for themselves. Collaborative learning involves students working in pairs or small groups to discuss concepts or find solutions to problems. Instructional strategies are techniques teachers use to help students become independent, strategic learners. These strategies become learning strategies when students independently select the appropriate ones and use them effectively to accomplish tasks or meet goals. Assessment refers to the wide variety of methods or tools that educators use to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness, learning progress, skill acquisition, or educational needs of students. And finally, there's Bloom's taxonomy, which is a classification system used to define and distinguish different levels of human cognition, i.e., thinking, learning, and understanding. Educators have typically used Bloom's taxonomy to inform and guide the development of assessments or curriculum, such as units, lessons, projects, or learning activities. The United States uses standards-based curriculums to maintain quality education. When using technology during instruction, it should be integrated into content areas. In other words, educators shouldn't teach technology for technology's sake. Now, integrating technology into instruction requires two sets of standards: content and technology. The content are drawn from curriculums such as math, science, and English. The Maryland State curriculum contains subject-based curriculums is an example of this type of content standards. Next, there is the technology standards found in the ISTE standards, which articulates the skills learners need to succeed when using technology and future-focused learning strategies. The SAMR model is a framework created by Dr. Ruben Pentadura that categorizes 4 different degrees of classroom technology integration. Letters SAMR stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. The SAMR model was created to share a common language across disciplines as teachers strive to help students visualize complex concepts. Bloom's taxonomy is a series of cognitive skills and learning objectives arranged in a hierarchical model. Each step of the pyramid, from bottom to top, represents a move from a lower order thinking skill to a higher order one, from straightforward concrete cognition to a more abstract conceptual understanding. Bloom's taxonomy is a great tool for helping teachers to develop higher order critical thinking abilities in students. Referring to the taxonomy's concepts during the planning process helps teachers to focus in on appropriate objectives for groups and individuals and to plan for their progression in the short, medium, and longer term. The taxonomy provides a clear framework or system of organization for classifying lesson objectives as well as a coherent starting point to build lessons from. Real-world application is not a problem solved in isolation or death by worksheet culture. Here is an example of real-world application in math. Unfortunately, due to natural phenomena such as tsunamis and also human activity, the coral reefs of the world are disappearing. In an attempt to solve this problem, humans have sunk decommissioned naval boats to start new artificial reefs. The hulls of the ships provide a strong foundation for coral to colonize. The local science center is sponsoring a competition for student groups to assume the role of reef designers. Your team of reef designers must locate offshore locations for new artificial reefs off a coastline. Your team must use their knowledge of coordinated planes to locate and record ideal locations for the artificial reefs. This is an example of real-world application in math. Educators should look for ways to incorporate collaboration and cooperative learning into instruction. That doesn't mean group work. Cooperative learning must involve everyone with a role and responsibility. Some benefits include adds discussion, problem sharing, and multiple points of view. It's an essential skill for the future. It should be ingrained into all lessons. And again, equal roles and opportunities for all individuals in each group. Assure is an instructional design model that has the goal of producing more effective teaching and learning. Assure is an acronym that stands for the various steps. A is for analyze learners and learner characteristics. The first S is for state objectives. The second S is for select, modify, or design materials. The U stands for to utilize the materials. The R stands for require learner response. And finally, the E stands for evaluation, both the student and the teacher. You will be using the Assure model for lesson planning. The first step is the A for Analyze Learners. Here are some of the elements to communicate. The number of students in your class, the number of males and females, the age range, the mental, social, physical, social notes such as the disabilities present in your classroom, the learning differences, the cultural and ethnic notes, current knowledge, prerequisites, and notes about learner attitudes, learning styles. For example, what's the percentage of students that are visual learners or auditory learners or kinesthetic learners? Finally, other. Are there other situations or elements that will help to better analyze your learners? Next is state the objectives. What are the sources of your objectives? What are the content standards and the technology standards? Don't forget the ABCDs of strong objectives, which include A for audience, B for behavior, C for condition, and D for the degree. For more information, feel free to look up ABCD of lesson objective writing. Next is select methods, media, and materials. Methods, media, and materials needed for the lessons are listed. Give rationales why these selected methods, materials, and media are appropriate for your lesson. What are the methods? There should be at least more than two. What are the media? For an example, are you using flip charts, PowerPoint slides, computer-based games or tools? What are the materials? For instance, textbooks, or what are some book titles, or educational games, or web quests? Next, U is utilize media, materials, and methods. How will the teachers and students use these materials? For each listed, detail on how they will be implemented into the lesson to enhance learning with the 5 P's. Preview the materials, what you need to preview. Prepare the materials, what things need to prepare before the lesson. Prepare the environment, where the learning takes place. How about the seating, lighting, temperature of that place? Also consider the online learning environment. Prepare the learners, how you engage students in learning during the warm-up section. Finally, provide the learning experiences. Outline the required learner participation. Next, require learner participation. Includes detailed methods for actively engaging all students for the lesson's duration. In this period of time, how do you engage your students with the methods that you provide in the previous sections? Finally, include evaluation methods for each of the following. Number 1, student performance. How were your students evaluated? What criteria did you use to evaluate them? Can you construct a rubric or exit ticket for their performance during the lesson? And finally, technology and media effectiveness. How did you evaluate the effective use of the media that you selected for this lesson? Again, here's a review of the components of a well-constructed technology-enriched lesson plan. First, the preliminary elements. How long will the lesson take? What's the grade? What's the subject? Next, technology and content standards. Make sure to identify the sources for the standards like the Common Core or the state curriculum. Next, Include engaging opening activities to get the students going, like a warm-up or motivation. Next, detailed sequential lesson steps describing what the students and teachers are doing. Next, opportunity for student collaboration. Next, make sure the lesson promotes higher order thinking skills as well as lower order thinking skills. Are the students creating some sort of authentic product? Did you, the teacher and student, use multiple technology tools, websites, etc.? How will learning be evaluated? And finally, you must create one single student resource to include with the lesson plan. The student resource could be anything. It could be a handout. It could be an exit ticket. It could be some sort of resource. In this module, there's a lesson plan called Pitfall Pete. Although it isn't in the same format as the lesson plan you will develop, it does have many of the same elements as the format you will be developing. In a moment, pause the video and read through Pitfall Pete. As you read, complete the informal review of the plan using the praise, question, polish format. P is for praise. Identify aspects of the technology-rich lesson plan that you consider strengths. Q is for question. What questions do you still have about the technology-enriched lesson plan? And finally, P is for polish. Provide any constructive feedback for the technology-enriched lesson plan. For the lesson plan process, you will first complete the proposal and submit it onto the learning management system. You will notice it is structured using the Assure model. Also, there is a purple text to assist you in your lesson plan development. The instructor will provide you feedback to assist in lesson plan development. The TELP also requires you to find and use internet or digital resources. You have to document this process by completing the search log. It asks for the search engine you use to find the resource, the name of the site, the URL, evaluation criteria you use to vet the resource. See the evaluation criteria on the learning management system for more details, and the intent on how the resource will be used during the lesson. As a teacher resource during the planning phase, or a teacher resource used during the lesson with students? Is it a tool directly used with students, or as a student resource they might use just in case? Finally, use the TELP template to complete your lesson plan and submit it to the ePortfolio. Please use the checklist to verify you have included all the components. Remember, create a student-centric lesson. Control the amount of teacher talk, lecture, and direct instruction. It can be used, but look for methods to embrace active, experiential learning while using technology to make powerful connections. Next, we're moving on to rubrics. A rubric is an assessment tool. Rubrics use specific criteria as the basis for evaluating and assessing student performance. Rubrics are a popular method of authentic assessment. There are two basic kinds of rubrics, analytic and holistic. There's a big difference between a rubric and a grading checklist. A rubric is meant to eliminate the subjectivity in assessing student work with clear descriptions of masterful work. Students can use them in a sort of backwards design to map out their task or assignment. A checklist is simply a list of characteristics to look for with point values associated with them. An analytic rubric assesses students on each of several different dimensions of performance. A holistic rubric looks at student performance as a whole. Neither one is better than the other. Consider your students, the learning objectives, and the assignment when you decide which type of rubric to use. An analytic rubric always includes the following three elements: criteria or dimensions of performance, levels of achievement, and descriptors or standards. Use rubrics to provide clarity when assessing subjective assignments with no clear right or wrong answer. Define in clear terms what is excellent and what is poor. Effectively communicate to students what is expected of them. Have a transparent assessment process. Explain to parents where their child excels and where he or she needs improvement. And finally, to provide clear feedback or feed forward to students. Best practices for criteria include use language and terms the students are familiar with. The criteria should be clearly related to the assignment, and be sure to include only the most essential components of student performance for the assignment. Too many criteria can be overwhelming. This is the core of the rubric. The descriptors describe and define the characteristics of student work at each level of achievement. Best practices for creating descriptors. Base your descriptors on actual student work that you have seen in the past. If you are designing a rubric for a lesson that you have taught many times, think about your earlier experiences. Why did you give Susie's work 10 points? Why was it good? Why did you give Carol's work 2 points? Why was it bad? Best practices for creating descriptors. Base your descriptors on actual student work that you have seen in the past. If you are designing a rubric for a lesson that you have taught many times, think about your earlier experiences. Why did you give Susie's work 10 points? Why was it good? Why did you give Carol's work 2 points? Why was it bad? Universal design is the design and composition of an environment so that it can be accessed, understood, and useful to the greatest extent possible by all people regardless of their age, size, ability, or disability. An environment or any building, product, or service in that environment should be designed to meet the needs of all people who wish to use it. In the context of learning, Universal Design for Learning is a framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people based on scientific insights into how humans learn. As you plan your lesson, consult the framework and consider using some of the strategies to optimize learning for all students in your class. See the resources on Joule.